Thanks, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for taking some time this morning to join this event. Thank you to the panel. So I just want to have about 3 slides here. I'll give some general background. You know, when it comes to Internet of Things, it used to have a lot of names, remote monitoring, and things like that. Now it has some general definitions, and it's made kind of Wikipedia. So it's really the idea that you can add small computing devices to really anything. And if you look at how we look at it from a Bosch perspective, it's really allowing the organization to change their business model and the business models of other organizations. So when you're able to connect assets and move data into an enterprise, you can do other really functional type of things, and it's all about reduction in cost, creating a better life for people from a medical perspective, but not focusing on the business type of objectives. What we're going to kind of talk about here, I think, is more what you see in a consumer environment and the wearables and things like that. So if you look at the market, there's billions and billions and billions, and Ericsson and Intel, Cisco, everybody talks about the billions of devices that are going to be connected. And there's connected people, the connected applications, connected equipment, and the opportunity for the cost savings for business as well is in the trillions. And so what's really driving this? The cost to connect has really come down tremendously. And so if you look at a cellular module 4 or 5 years ago, and I'll ask one of the technical panelists here like Scott, what was a module cost 5 years ago compared to today to add a cellular module to the internet?
So 5 years ago, you would be on most generally what people would refer to as 1G. That might be a $50 to $60 module 5 years ago.
And what is that module today?
In very high volumes, 10. In a typical industrial volume, so moving away from your consumer statement, it goes up to 20. But compared to the cost of the asset, it's way, way less.
Yeah. So what we've seen is the ability, to create the hardware to connect and redesign products, but also the cost of the network. Probably in about 2002, 2003, we did our first connection to a machine, and we literally Velcroed an old cell phone into an ice machine and moved the data, and it didn't really have a name like Internet of Things. But it cost us about $60 a month for the cell phone service. And the last large deal that we did to connect an asset was about 30 cents a month. And so the costs have come down dramatically, and we're able to see a lot of things connected. So I think a lot of people on the panel were probably at the Consumer Electronics Show. I was there as well. I walked around to see what things are being connected more from a consumer standpoint. And there's a pair of socks that you can wear and you can connect to your cell phone. So it tells you the temperature of your feet, where the pressure is on the socks. Really strange, but they're connected. There's actually a yoga mat. There's a yoga mat that's connected to your phone. It gives you the instructions, but it also has sensors in the mat that tells you, are you doing a yoga position correctly? I didn't know there was such a thing. Obviously, the connected lock, which is pretty practical. We've heard about that from a smart home perspective. Nike has their connected tennis shoes, determine how fast you're running, how hard you're pivoting on the basketball court. This was interesting, a connected fishing bobber. So not only does it have sonar in the bottom to detect the fish, but it has Bluetooth to your phone in the top to let you know when there is a fish. I don't know how lazy we're getting in the world, but that kind of removes the idea of fishing. This was a connected tennis racket. It's actually a cell module and a handle of a tennis racket. And you'll see some of the pro athletes now that are going to be using this. So it shows how much power, at what angle, at what position on the racket you actually hit the ball. So it's kind of interesting from a training perspective. This was interesting, a connected cane. So this cane has GPS coordinates in it, has a cell module, it has a speaker, and it has a little display. And so if grandma's out for a walk and I can see where she is, the little screen has arrows to point her where to go. I can talk to her and give her directions. I didn't know there was such a need, but it's kind of interesting. We also had this little connected, I call it a connected baby, a little patch you put on a baby, connects to your phone, and you can have the heart monitor, the conditions, the temperature, the movement of the baby as you go throughout the night. And I think they got 2 more. So this is a little device you put into plants, and so you know when your plants need water, and it Bluetooths to your phone. Kind of interesting. So again, you don't have to bend over and check the plant for water. It'll just tell you when it needs water. And this was, which one was, this was a connected toothbrush. So you can actually connect your toothbrush You can connect it to your dentist. They can see how long you're brushing, how many times a day, everything. So you can see with the cost coming down, the ability to connect, it's transmitting a lot of data and allowing you to do maybe some important things and maybe some mundane things. But I think it's interesting, and I'll let the panel and Joanne take it from here and talk about, where is this evolving and where will we end up. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Those are great examples. So we are so glad to be with you this morning to talk about the two important trends, just two of them, impacting our business and our personal lives: IoT, the Internet of Things, and wearable electronics. So, and also I just want to add thanks again to Bosch Software Innovations for sponsoring this program with us today, and to Matt, who's here from the Chicago office. Matt is, if we didn't say, Director of Bosch Software Innovations for the Americas. So appreciate him and his team members here today. So these trends, whether you have been very fluent in them and up to the minute, or they're just coming into your consciousness very lately, are not in fact wild ideas that technologists have dreamed up for the future, although yes, some of those are a little far out. And I know another big device from the Consumer Electronics Show was a boomerang drone that can go out from you while you're ziplining on your expeditions, take pictures of it, and then boomerang back to you. So there are some that are wild, but many, many more mainstream practical applications of IoT and wearable electronics are here today and already shaping how we live and how we work. So if you want to learn more about those, you've indeed come to the right place. And then we hope our speakers, and then later we'll have a question and answer session that will give you just a slice of what's taking place in these areas today. And this is just a quick dip in the water. So we have invited speakers who are on the front lines of working with these new technologies and leaders in their field. They're builders of platforms and products, developers of smart technology designed to make life better, more secure, more independent for the end consumers who use them. And they can also talk about what's changed and why these technologies have come into sharp focus in 2015. So before I introduce their professional backgrounds, I just want to tell you a couple of interesting facts I've learned about these individuals in addition to their technological pedigrees. And instead of telling you which goes with which, I'm going to let you take little notes, and I'll see if who can guess the connection to all three on these trivia facts. So one of our speakers spends his time working with obsolete technologies to counter what he's doing in the way out there world. So recently he's restored a manual wristwatch in a jukebox. Another speaker had dinner and enjoyed a birthday party with Les Paul on his 90th birthday. That would be Les Paul's 90th, not our speaker's. But had to crash at about 2:30 a.m. while the host was still going strong. This speaker also competed for Letterman's Stupid Human Tricks with an ice bucket and beer cans on his chin. It's another story. And yet another of our speakers has played drums at a Super Bowl halftime performance and sung before two presidents. So I'll let you guess. And that's before their professional accomplishments. So moving on to those. So first, at my right, Dave Mayne, Vice President of Marketing for Resolution Products. Dave leads Resolution Products corporate and product market engagement. They make wireless products primarily for the home security market. He'll tell you more about that. He's been a leader in the wireless device networking market, helping to develop new business and product opportunities for companies like Digi International, GE Security, Interlogic, Gibson, and Itron. He was previously general manager of the Interactive Services division of GE, where he helped launch 3 interactive service offerings, including an elder care platform called Home Assurance. Resolution Products just received the Tech Home Mark of Excellence Award at the January CES show for its Helix. So congratulations on that accomplishment. Scott Wilken is Chief Technology Officer of MultiTech Systems. So I've got an intro and the background bio of Scott because very kindly he has stood in for Rod Landers, and we're thrilled that he's here because as Chief Technology Officer, he will have a lot to add, and he is an experienced connector. And in the IoT world, that means he's been connecting devices in various professional technology roles in both wired and wireless mediums for more than 2 decades. He's held many positions from hands-on software, circuit board and chip design engineering to technology leadership positions. He was 13 years a product development executive at Logic PD, and he's held various roles in aerospace, commercial, and contract engineering. So thanks for being here. And then finally, Mohammed Abdurrahman, Ph.D., is founder and chief tech evangelist of Playtabase. Mohammed has been hailed by others as a management and product development genius who has developed a wearable electronic device I know you'll be hearing more about, named Remo, developed from scratch while working on his Ph.D. in linguistics. Inspired by a stroke that Abdurrahman's father suffered in 2010, Remo, the device, enables the wearer to control smart functions around the house with the wave of a hand. So Remo, coming to market this year, has gained already international attention within the wearable tech, health tech, and Internet of Things markets. It was featured in the Wearable Technology Conference and Expo in London, South by Southwest, and BitHouse 2014, just to name a few. He has recently stepped away from the role of CEO of Playtabase to focus on the vision, partnerships, new products, and evangelizing for the fledgling firm. And he's founded Remo and many other technological projects and speaks several languages, including German. And that's our intros. So our format today is we'll ask each of the speakers to lead us off with a few minutes, and then we'll go into questions, and then open it up. So thanks again to our speakers.
And then I'll start. Okay. So again, I'm Dave Mayne. Resolution Products is my company. We're actually based in Hudson, Wisconsin, about a half hour east of the cities. And a company that's been in business about 6 years. And I see we're at an event called Wired World. Ironically, virtually everything we do is wireless. But we're talking about connected devices and different applications. And all the founders of my company, most of the engineers came out of GE Security. We came out of the GE business, which has been very actively involved in connected devices. And we've been building applications around the connected home. Security types of offerings. We make a lot of different RF technologies, from Bluetooth that we saw on a bunch of the devices that were mentioned at the intro, to cellular communications, which were also discussed in a variety of other systems. And you know, the focus and topic today is around what's the Internet of Things going to evolve to? How's it going to impact our life? How's it going to impact our business? And I view that, I'll go back to the Internet. The Internet existed for 20 years before we really came up with a commercial relevance to that platform, how to connect and network devices and people. And it's exploded since then with, you know, everything from how businesses interact, and virtually everything businesses do today is based on some level of internet connectivity and network connectivity, to how we live our lives as consumers with Facebook and Google and all of these different applications and business models that have been built around this. And I think we're going to see the same thing on the Internet of Things. There's a lot of devices that Matt mentioned at the intro. Some of those are going to be real relevant and play, and others are going to fade away, and someday they'll just be a trivia question on Trivia Crack or something. But the goal is to build relevance and to build business models, whether it's how it impacts your consumer or how it impacts business. My business is focused on connected homes and connected devices. We built our foundation on the security industry. Why is that? Well, there's a relevant business model. It's been around for 20, 30, 40 years. It's proven. People know how to make money at it. Everybody looks at it and says, well, that's kind of stodgy and old. Well, we take a fresh new look at it. We took the security system and built it into an Internet of Things hub. It's battery backed up. It's got all the life safety features you need for an intrusion system. But now it has Bluetooth technology in it and cellular and a variety. We've got about 7 radios inside this hub. Not all of them are going to win and be relevant over time, but it allows us to now work with wearable devices, work with the new Apple Watch that'll be coming out, or the Samsung watches. We have a variety of little pendant devices that can track elderly if they're wandering outside the area using Bluetooth. And there's a broad range of other Bluetooth devices we can start to capture information from. And our goal is to really continue to drive innovation around connected technologies and devices, and then build out from existing proven business models and try to see which types of industries are going to thrive as these new devices become developed. So that's my background.
Thanks. Great. Scott?
Thank you. As mentioned, my name's Scott Wilken, and I have been connecting devices for about 20 years. I'll admit to it, just a little bit over that. But I've kind of been through a variety of industries where that was the case. So when I started out as a new grad, I worked on a system as a software engineer that was for managing handoff between airports as airplanes came by. And then there was a digital radio that went with that more or less did texting in the sky. So not that far off from definitions today that meet IoT. I spent 13 years at Logic PD, which is a based locally house that has offices around the country and does contract design, engineering, and manufacturing. And honestly, that was a really fun job for this space because you got to design other people's products. So it gave me exposure to a wide array of different things people are doing in different industries. So if I take that experience and roll it into my now experience at MultiTech, where I've been about a year and a half, MultiTech really only makes connected device things, and we don't make the end device. What we make is basically the gateways that allow all of these things to be connected. So Matt earlier in his presentation asked me about cellular connected things. We sell cellular modules, so if you happen to be a sensor company and you want to get this thing on the internet, I can help you get that cellular enabled so it can go directly to the internet. But really the more interesting part of MultiTech's business is in selling gateways, and much like what Dave described at Resolution, we have a different bent because we're not selling a security system, but we absolutely are selling a hub. So we also can support multiple radios, which help enable Internet of Things. Some of the barriers to really having this take off previously, one of the reasons it's starting to get a lot of buzz, is there's now finally a ubiquitous coverage of wireless, which makes it easy for me to get data out. But the problem with that is there's so many wireless standards, there isn't one real good way to do that. And so you need products like Resolution has, like MultiTech has, to kind of aggregate these things and put them into a format other machines can understand. I heard this comment come up differently twice now from the two speakers, but it's the case that IoT as a name is new, right? We've been hearing about this for, I would guess, a couple years now. Some companies have a specific bent to it. So Qualcomm, they mean IoT, which is Internet of Things. They have their own branded version of that called IOE, which is Internet of Everything. But we're all talking about the same thing here. And if you go back, actually, if I could tack on to Dave's security example, I actually think one of the best examples classically of what is an IoT system is a remotely monitored security system. Those have been around for 40 years, actually really longer than that. And you go back to the 70s and they took advantage of copper wire because that's what was there. There wasn't ubiquitous wire coverage in the way AT&T and Verizon and other companies can bring us now. But in the end, IoT today still is about what gains can I get. And the obvious gains are financial. In the case of healthcare wearables, can I live longer? There's gains there. So if I have a 50s security system, 1950s, that's like 10 guys and a couple dogs walking around my building. It's expensive. So the fact that I have to build this custom infrastructure with a security panel and some back end I have to design to make sure somebody can monitor it and tell if things are going on without people there was really all about cost savings. The benefit outweighed the gain and the benefit outweighed the cost of doing it. Because of things like we have now where it's easy to connect to devices at a physical layer, it's making it more economical to have other savings. So smart cities are things I think we'll probably talk about later as some of the questions go along, but it's making sense. I can get past IT systems now if I can go out of the building some other way. That's not a nefarious statement, but it is the case, like if I look at maybe medical devices. If I create some medical device and want to stick it in a hospital, the hospital's IT system does not want that. They don't want to figure out what's the strange security risk on my network. So if I can get that data out of there by cellular, so much the better. I think at this point, maybe I'll call that my summary, but my position on IoT is really about what are the gains and benefits that allow it to move forward.
Great, thanks, Mohammed.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's a real honor to be on a panel with your experience levels. You guys have done a lot of really amazing stuff. In my own background, I mean, my first computer was the Commodore 64. when I was a little kid. Yeah, there's a few Commodore fans still here.
Had a VIC-20?
Yeah, okay. Any Wayne computer fans? Yeah, my dad used to sell Wayne computers. I'm on a slightly different end. The other speakers, Scott and Dave, are more on a kind of B2B infrastructure side. And what my company does, Playtabase, we make a product called Remo, which is effectively the size of your watch, and it gives you the power to control these connected devices simply by waving your hand. So effectively, you could point at a light, put your hand down, that light goes off. You could point at the fan, whip it around, the fan gets going. Or you can do whole scene control. Say you want to get cozy with somebody, you could do a gesture, and then the fireplace comes up, the music comes up, a little Barry White, the blinds come down. You got a little romance mode there happening. And so what our focus is really is on making these new connected devices that are coming out on the market, and I mean there's new ones every week, accessible. And when I say accessible, I mean not just accessible in a sense that, oh, I've got my smartphone and I can press a few buttons, which is actually kind of an awkward way to interact with things, but I mean accessible in a broader sense. Being able to bring all these different devices together, they come as individual apps on your phone, which means you have to turn on your phone, unlock your phone, find that app, deal with it. For years, we've had the ubiquitous computing, smart home, et cetera, and people say, why isn't it being adopted en masse? It's so cool, why isn't it being adopted? It's very hard to use. In the same way personal computers were very hard to use until you had, well, the mouse. The ability to just point and click on the things instead of having to press tab and fuddle around with the keyboard. My own academic background is in speech recognition technology. My Ph.D. is in linguistics, as Joanne said. Part of the reason I came up with Remo in particular is because at Playtabase we see this growing interface for these connected devices as being a central front for making them accessible and making sure that the industry succeeds. So for this reason, we focus on this this gesture technology with an understanding that in the future we're likely to see an interaction between voice recognition tech, natural language understanding, as well as gesture in order to complete that picture in the same way the keyboard and the mouse are able to complete that picture when we surf the internet today. So that's our orientation. Of course, the speaker also mentioned the background with my father and his strokes. Quite simply, the average person, certainly a lot of older boomers and a lot of seniors who are trying to get around are not going to be fuddling around with their phone to control their lights. It's not going to happen. It's very difficult, and God forbid they drop it and have to try to find it, pick it up, etc. Fortunately, there's Remo. We work out of the box with roughly 55 million devices across the U.S. and Canada. That's all of the home automation tech that you can get from Comcast, Xfinity, ADT Health, Time Warner, AT&T. We also work with Logitech, and just out at CES we were doing demos with several of the firms, including Logitech, and we had a fun experience. You know, CES is a big, noisy, crazy place, and I mean, you can't hear anything. Speech recognition, a demo for speech recognition is a little bit harder to pull off. Again, fortunately, there's Remo. And so, you know, we were doing live demos there with our alpha technology right now, and happy to announce that we're doing a development program as well for individuals as well as for corporations that are interested in leveraging our gesture control software. I think what you'll see in the long term is that a lot of these disparate devices will take the core technology, the core approaches that they have, and they'll integrate into one kind of super device. It's the same way that we have all the, I think they called it a Palm Pilot when I was in high school. In this magical device, this crazy thing, the same way. I think we're going to see that. So that's our orientation at Playtabase, and that's what we're doing with Remo, the gesture controlling software for the IoT. Thank you.
Thanks. Can we just give our speakers a round of applause? What cool and fascinating technologies, and what a great range I think we have from the perspectives of the translators and the connectors to a wearable consumer device. So I really appreciate the variety and the effort you've put into this. So what are the drivers is a question I've got for any of you that have made this, like you said, some of this has been going for 20 years, but what are the drivers that are making IoT and wearables such an interesting market today, so interesting for investors, consumers? Is it consumer need? Is it the technology? Is it costs? All of the above? Anyone?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll lead in, and I think it was touched on when Matt started, and I think we've all touched on it. One of the big drivers is a drop in cost and an increase in availability of technology. We've talked about the fact that there's a variety of different technologies that exist out there for communications, but there are a couple that seem to really be gaining solid traction. Cellular communications. The cost of that has come down both in service of a connected device. The carriers have come up with plans that make it very attractive for efficient data communication devices versus your smartphone. Bluetooth technology, which is integrated into most smartphones and tablets that are out there. If you have any sort of device that can communicate and can be controlled, you want to be able to control it. And the fact that you have a smartphone sitting in your pocket or within reach 24 hours a day that has Bluetooth technology in it and has cellular. It's connected to the internet and it can connect to things locally. Those types of advances are really pushing things forward. And then there's just more and more, I think, of a consumer and a business need towards capturing of information or sharing of information. So from a consumer standpoint, one of the topics that will likely come up today is data privacy. All this data is being captured. What's going to happen with that? And it's a real topic, and it's something that has to be addressed. But one of the things that my view on data privacy and what I like to share is very different from my kids' views. I have a 17 and 20-year-old kid, and they share absolutely everything about what they're doing and where they are, and their friends do as well. And so there's a willingness to share as long as there's benefits that come associated with it. And from a business standpoint, I think there's a desire to start to capture and drive efficiencies and savings in how businesses operate and deliver. At GE, when I was there, we did a lot of work in airplane engines. We didn't make airplanes, but we leased them, and we had engines, and we had a variety of things. And we were capturing data on all the takeoffs and landings of these aircrafts. And it optimized the maintenance programs around them. And so I think it's reduction in cost of technology, availability of that technology, and then more of a desire to manage our businesses and personal lives more efficiently are all factors that are coming together to help drive traction and development around the Internet of Things.
Yeah. Thanks.
Matt?
Others?
I like what you said, Dave. The thing I would tack onto that, because I agree with everything you said, by the way, the infrastructure thing, it's all important. The other thing I would add, though, is the adoption of standards. I think from 2000 to 2010, in different capacities, I designed a number of IoT systems, what you would call IoT systems today, and generally they were all custom. Like, they worked very well for the specific application they were designed for, but they weren't very scalable to anything else, and I would hope that wasn't because I did anything wrong, right? It's just the state of the union at that point. There's so many things, and we touched on it with the hubs before, that all need to be made to talk to each other in a standard way, and that's where the big change has been, I think, over just the last maybe 2 years. If I stick with the hub example, and I've got a bunch of disparate things locally that all wind up in one spot, they still have to go presumably to the internet, but somewhere, so I can get the data back to my company and take action, whether that's automated action or somebody makes a decision based on that data. But in the past, all of those things required a team, probably, of software engineers to write a lot of special software to make all this happen, where now there are standard ways to format that data where I can go use products that are off the shelf and make my IT people feel very comfortable. IBM has products that do this. SAP has products that do this. Bosch has products that do this. Whereas before, if I'm dealing with anybody, it's a small company that my IT system doesn't know. It's not that I have a particular affinity for IBM, but it is, I think everybody's heard, nobody got fired for picking IBM. You can now pick IBM in IoT. So that helps. Similarly, again, my bent to this is more about monitoring and control than wearables. That would be the case for, like, you, for instance, Mohammed. there are now emerging standards for that too. An oil refinery is a place where there's a lot of opportunity for improvements that are due to IoT technologies, but it's also a very hostile environment for wireless. So there are companies that make chips that allow me, again, to do very custom designs that allow me to get past these wireless issues. But there's no standards. Once I do that, that works really great for that one refinery. And there are new committees out that are starting to do things with long range and low power. So while Bluetooth is really good for me to the first table, or really even maybe the back of the room if I have good line of sight, if I have a lot of metal in the room, it's not going to go very far. So I need something better, and that better is nearly here.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I want to shift to another question, and related to that is, what about the demographic trends? So we've got the silver tsunami coming. Many folks are experiencing some form of disability, and that really was an impetus for you personally, but now there are products that are coming out that can serve consumers, but also an older market. So maybe, how would you like to take that one?
Sure, yeah. So definitely the demographic shifts are a major factor. I mean, certainly the standards aspects are huge, the movements that are happening there, but there's also a certain issue of comfort with the technology, for one, and then the ability conceptually to build on what's been done. So you have this understanding, okay, when I was a little kid, my grandmother had a pedometer that she wore. Now that pedometer would have Bluetooth, would push to her iPhone, and she'd get her information. When we get to a point where we've taken the internet and then we've gotten so comfortable that now we're sharing pictures and all kinds of things on it, we're using it, we're requiring it for communications, for job submissions, et cetera, then the population that now the aging, the boomers and folks, their parents, have access. My parents are boomers. Have access to this technology and experience with it, such that it is not a frightening prospect to somebody who's in their late 50s that, okay, I'm going to have an iPad next to my bed, right? Or I'm going to connect with people in different ways. So given that, being able to leverage that technology and being able to understand that technology can be helpful and is not scary, is accessible, is understandable, makes that market possible. Otherwise, I mean, you can knock on as many doors as you want and try to sell a product to people. If they look at it and they don't understand it, the confused mind says no, right? So having all the structures in place in terms of the All Scene Alliance, some of the work that the companies, Remo works with All Scene and All Join and Internet Consortium, having those things in place, that the standards are the first piece. The next piece is just whether or not people feel comfortable around the tech. And then once people do, you can put it into the things that they need. And that's why you see a walking cane that's connected, because now people aren't afraid.
Yeah.
Could I just add to
Sure,
that
absolutely.
too? So I agree completely, Mohammed, with what you're saying. And I think, beyond just the comfort level with it, it's what value is it going to bring to me? Do I gain something out of it? And I'm going to use some examples. So we all see the insurance companies, auto insurance companies, that have little devices that if you put this in your car, it'll track how you drive. Do you brake too fast? Do you drive too fast? And if you do this, you get some benefits on insurance. Now, some people say, yeah, track me, follow me, I'll take those benefits. I think the same thing comes with aging population. If there's technology that can allow people to live independently, stay in their home, people don't want to move into assisted living or nursing homes or anything like that. That's kind of a frightening prospect. So is there technology I can adopt that will allow me to safely and comfortably live in my home for a longer period of time? That's something that people will take on. And people have used our products to both for, I'll say, kind of assisted living types of facilities, as well as in-home care, just monitoring activity and allowing people to live independently. Is it for everybody? No, but you can opt in if it's going to bring you some degree of benefits. And I think, I could envision a time where medical insurance companies do what the auto insurance did. You wear one of these wearable devices and allow us to collect this data and see how active you are. And if you do 5,000 steps a day, you're going to get a 10% discount on your insurance. It's not happening yet, but I don't think it's that far away, honestly.
Joan?
I don't think it is either.
Yeah, to piggyback on that. So I mean, when I talk to folks who are a little bit older, it's this combination of the factors of the benefit and the comfort level. I tell them about Remo and they say, "Wow, that's cool. I want one." And then I say, "Yeah," and then it can help you stay in your home. And they're like, "Oh, good, because I really don't want to go to a home." So absolutely.
Yeah.
So that,
We've been talking about the personal types of devices, and I think we'll keep flipping back and forth to that, but I'm remembering one of the examples that I heard about at MultiTech was the smart city. So not only can you have improvements in your home and for personal use, but cities and communities and how we care for the young, the old, and all the resources that we spend tax dollars on could be improved by these technologies. And Scott, do you want to share a little bit about examples of smart cities and what that might mean?
yeah, absolutely. So we actually have a project going with a particular city right now that I think there'll be a demo of probably by the end of the year. But the technologies that do go into that I'm very comfortable about talking about, we've done some demonstrations in Europe in the last year with a company called ARM. Many of you may have heard of them, many may have not, but they make the processor that powers more or less every cell phone in the world. They're a giant company that you probably don't hear about in your daily life. But because of that, they're very interested in connected devices generally, and they're interested in MultiTech's connectivity. So what we've done with them is a little demonstration where we've put sensors on top of street lights, and we can tell if the street lights are on, and then we can correlate that to if there's any traffic going on the street. So should the street light even be on, or should it be on at a lower level, right? Maybe it's a neighborhood, so it shouldn't ever really go off. But you get a few things out of that. Currently, cities don't know if the street light is operating. So by simply just detecting heat from the light, you can tell if the light bulb might be burnt out. And so you can not send somebody from maintenance to check on the street light periodically until you know it's out. Similarly, I think maybe one of the things you heard about, Joanne, is a garbage can sensor. This is kind of neat, and this isn't just at your home where you can see that translating to, but this particular city spends a lot of money. They have a whole group of people who their job is to go along, like to parks, and check garbage cans. If it's time to empty them, they empty them, and if it's not, then they come back the next day. So it'd be a whole lot better if they just knew it was time to change the garbage can and only set the truck just the one time when it was ready to get done. This kind of harkens back to my earlier example of there needs to be some financial benefit to really get there possibly a health benefit as well. There needs to be a benefit to get wide-scale adoption. In this case, it is financial because I don't need to roll a truck unless there's a reason to roll the truck.
Thanks. Did anyone have anything to add there? Otherwise, I wanted to ask about some healthcare applications, and I think Remo certainly potentially is healthcare.
I can speak a little bit to this the scalability in the city.
Sure.
So this aspect of having the Internet of Things technology, ubiquitous computing technology all around us has, ridiculous potential to change our lives. We're all deeply embedded in this area, but the truth of the matter is nobody who was deep in personal computers and internet stuff in the early 90s or the late 90s first saw Facebook and what it would do to everybody's life. Like, we don't really know what's going to emerge from all this. What we do know is trying to leverage the benefits of it are going to produce incredible effects for us, and then also trying to interact with these things around us. What is it going to do to our lives for the information we have? If it can tell the garbage truck when to come and pick something up, it's going to tell you when to eat. There's really, really pervasive opportunities there. And that goes to the health stuff, so I'm open to the question.
And I think, just kind of building on this, we're talking about a lot of technologies that have possibilities, and the industry, I mentioned this before, is the industry and consumers are going to kind of help guide us on what's going to drive adoption, what's going to win in the world of the Internet of Things. You look at the devices we're talking about. The iPhone, I see a couple of them, all of us have these up here. This was introduced, I think it just had a birthday 9 years ago. It's not that long ago that these things, and now virtually everybody has one, whether it's this or one of the Samsung devices. Facebook hasn't been around that long. My kids are older than Google. So there's a number of changes that have happened that really drive adoption in the way we use the internet and the way we use connectivity. And I think we're right at the forefront of that from these connected devices. Scott's talked about the fact that we've been getting devices to communicate for many years, and they've been these point solutions. They've been to solve a problem. Somebody will come in and say, I need to know when the garbage can needs to be picked up, and you solve that problem. And I think what we're now seeing is a transition from those solutions into really platforms or technologies that allow companies and people and innovations to happen at a much greater pace, and interoperability between all these devices. That's what's going to drive adoption, and now it comes down to what makes business sense and what do consumers really demand.
If that's true, that it really will be a platform affecting so many markets, both business and personal, do you see any particular vertical markets, any of you standing out, or really do I hear you saying as a group that almost all vertical markets will potentially be affected by this technology? By that I mean, a healthcare and education, et cetera, by vertical markets.
I'm going to do a brief intro and then pass it on to the colleagues up here, but I think we've hit on a lot of them. You look at the pain points, where you're going to have some challenges. Healthcare costs are rising, so healthcare is probably going to be one area that's going to adopt technology and try to figure out how can we use this to minimize the growth in costs. And I think beyond that, in the business world, it's going to come down to how can you drive more efficiency in servicing equipment and keeping equipment running longer, or getting your business to operate more effectively from a fleet management standpoint. How can you, right now you can track your packages on, okay, it arrived in Minneapolis and it's out for delivery. Now you tie an Uber or a iHail type of technology on, you could track where the truck is compared to your facility and figure out when it's going to be delivered. So there's ways that it will be adopted over time, but I think you're going to look at where costs are spiraling, and that's probably where you're going to see the earliest wins.
May I? I see it very similarly to Dave. I see that there's maybe 2 or 3 tiers of how we deal with cost spiraling, but I think his analysis is spot on of that's the expansion is going to follow where the greatest need is. So if I use maybe agriculture, because we haven't talked about that as an area, that's actually huge for lots of monitoring and control. So right now it's the things you hear about are all about yield. How do I get more corn out of my cornfield? And that's a great thing to do. We all need to eat, so I like having corn. But the second tier that goes with that is water. There's lots of parts of the world, even our own country in a lot of places, there's shortages of fresh water. So there's already, this isn't new, there's active kind of customized applications that go towards controlling water application in fields, because agriculture by far uses the most fresh water. It's not what you'd think, flushing toilets and people drinking, it's agriculture. But then there's the second tier, and it's exactly that. So if I look at large apartment communities, mostly they have no idea if somebody has left their water on during the day or a toilet has a leak in it. So I think shortly we'll see applications that help control that in water conservation, because there's real savings there. But then there's the third tier, and there may not be a third tier in every market, but I think you could probably find one. If I stick with water and I look at a large city like New York City, there's a problem with residents of an apartment building, because generally it's the building that's metered, not the individual apartments. So typically the way those get billed out is, if there's 6 units, then they get 1/6 of the water bill. Well, if it's just me living in an apartment and I'm living next door to a family that's got 12 teenagers, I'm not going to think that's very fair. So that's less of a savings of the resource and more of a savings of the finance. And in water, I think that's probably the order it would go down. But every industry would be a little bit different.
Yeah, we're looking at, so there's 3 areas I would look at for these major changes, and it will be pervasive. I mean, we were just talking about connected socks. It's pervasive in ways we can't completely understand. But there's 3 areas that I'd specifically be looking at, and those are communications, transportation, and commerce. These are areas that are kind of on the periphery. Right now, a lot of folks are focused on, for wearables as connected devices specifically, fitness. But what we're seeing already is a certain kind of consolidation of things that were previously independent devices into others. For my own company, for example, we've partnered with a company called Atlas Wearables that did a fitness tracking kind of thing that could tell the difference between different kinds of push-ups and different kinds of exercises without you having to plug it in. And so Remo will be built in with that, despite the fact that it's not a core feature, and the same way the phone is. But the reason I say transportation, commerce, and communication is precisely because of the effects that the internet itself had in those areas. The massive sharing of information that we do now, when almost none of our devices are connected, should absolutely magnify to the point that your tie is giving you information or is connected. Your shoes are telling you which way to go without you having to check. That you're not just aware of where your package is being shipped, but at a more local level, like, okay, it hit Nashville and it's on its way to Minneapolis inside a drop center. No, it's on the corner of Marquette and 2nd Avenue. The delivery man is outside your door coming. You can actually see it. Why? Because there's proximity sensors around the city. This level of data sharing has the potential to become so pervasive, because it really funds the Internet of Things in a sense, to become so pervasive that the sharing that we do today on Facebook and Twitter is nothing compared to the amount of data this room would be generating right now, potentially in 10 years, just if all of our clothes were connected. Right. Okay.
And a lot to think about. Everyone's thinking about their ties, their socks. They're thinking, who's getting data off me right now?
Right now, somebody in this room. Right now, somebody in this room might be pushing a hole into their sock, and this is 7 years from now or whatever. Don't quote me on the number of years, but so many years from now, right now, you're pushing a hole through your sock, and Brooks Brothers knows and is ready with a new pair of socks. It's coming.
I love it. All right, so this is a segue. These are wonderful things, or not, but this is, I think, a great segue into the whole area of data privacy and security. So what is the industry doing? What are your companies doing? What does the industry need to do to make sure that all that massive sharing of data, whether it's how fast I drive my car, how well I drive my car, or whether I'm pushing a hole through my sock, that data goes to the places we want it to.
May I start with that?
Yep.
So Remo is actually kind of a central kind of connected device for this emerging Internet of Things. You can have a connected thermostat that can be kind of the center of a home, but it's a very rare scenario where you have a device that could interact in your home, in your office, in a conference center, at the hotel, in the fitness club, in the car, right? Remo is a very scalable and usable device, meaning I can immediately control the lights here if I can also control my lights at home. It's all part of the same system. I don't have to hook it up with my phone and try to reset everything. What that means, though, is that it puts us in the position almost of some kind of a connected mouse that knows the devices you're clicking on. So there's a ton of potential data that will come through us as the ecosystem emerges of internet-connected devices. Our own approach is to focus on the data security of the individual using Remo, and make sure that we focus on unique authentication, identification, and privacy in those specific areas, because of the responsibility of having that kind of interaction data. It is actually quite a significant area. I think the fellows who can speak to the infrastructure and all of that will be really profound. I'm waiting to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I can speak a little bit to that, actually. So kind of in your space, the consumer space, there are some really cool things going on. There's a consortium called the Thread Group that's led by a core of companies. One of them being Nest, which is really Google. So it's got real legs behind it. It takes what today are standards for communicating with small devices, and on top of that, you said something that is very important: authentication. Mm-hmm. There's security, which generally can mean encryption, right? I can make it so if somebody looks at that data, they don't know what it is. But until you have authentication on top of that, anybody can still get it, and with enough time, you generally can decrypt things. So authentication, do you belong on my network or not, is a big deal. And that's absolutely come into the home-oriented IoT devices. I think it's not a big extrapolation from there that you could, You probably wouldn't use it quite directly, but you could in other applications. But the concepts being generated there are good and useful elsewhere. So I can tell you what we're doing in the more industrial space is authentication, but also multiple layers of encryption. We have things that are deployed, really it's our customers that have these things, but they're deployed in the field where people aren't. That's kind of the whole point of that. So it's very difficult to avoid a physical attack. If somebody goes out and steals a device and decides to wire into it, how do I keep them off the network? The reality is, in some cases, I probably can't. I can't control that situation. So how do I make sure they can't do anything bad on the network is the real question to answer. So generally for our edge nodes, we have 2 layers of security. We have an encryption that just says, you can't even tell what all this data is. And we realize if somebody needed to break that, they could. And then on top of that, there's a second layer of encryption. So there's a piece when it hits our gateway, it'll go to what we call an application server, which will have an entirely separate decryption key. So whatever comes to that is still encrypted. It's encrypted differently, but then it gets decrypted a second time. So there is no security, I don't think, that is just totally unbreakable, but that makes it really difficult, and I think that's a fairly standard way to do it in an embedded situation.
I'm going to, I know you've got an answer on this, but I want to just, and you can answer this one first, ask, related to this thing about healthcare, and I've read something recently about infusion pumps in the hospitals, and they're wireless, and the data's there, and someone said, so if someone went in and affected that data, does it matter if they just changed your blood type from O to AB, right? Or the allergy information went away on the back end of the entire data of the medical system. So when there's wireless data, and I don't know if it's encrypted or not, I'm not that smart, but how do all the players, the hospital personnel, the people who put that infusion pump in, and the people who get and use the data, control the safety of people when it really is life and death?
So I'm just going to answer that and kind of build on the other topics. So data security through encryption and authentication is a constant battle of every connected device that's out there, and it will continue to evolve over time. So we all know the stories. You know, we think our credit cards are all secure when they go through the machine, but there's always somebody trying to hack it. And there's new and better encryption, and as computing technologies increase, especially those computing technologies that you can put out at the edge, you get more horsepower, more storage, you can do better and better encryption, you can build in authentication capabilities on top of that, and this is done in every device that we build, and really I think anybody is building up here, and it becomes more critical and more controlled and measured as you get into, you know, healthcare and life safety types of applications. I think a broader question, and one thing I wanted to address just as it relates to data privacy, and really what I see as a shift in the Internet of Things. So a lot of the topics we've talked about thus far on the panel here have been communicating devices and things that we're now able to get data from, and we're talking about maybe why and what applications would be around it, but we're capturing more data than anybody's really knows what to do, and now the shift seems to be big data, or how do you start to process all this information? And I know Matt, who opened this, is the head of the Software Innovations Group at Bosch. They're building platforms around making decisions around connected devices, and how do you use this data? And I think you're going to see over the next few years, clearly a continued migration on authentication, security, and different safeguards that you can put on the data, but I think even more so, how do you manage all this data, and how do you turn it into something that's actionable and usable for business or for consumers or for anything, and that's going to be a big push that will evolve, I think, over the next several years.
Can I add to that just a little bit?
Sorry. Of course, no, you can.
You did say one thing there, though, that I thought was poignant, because it's not that it's a problem, it's that the industry needs to do it better, but that processing of all the data was a key thing. So one example, a very common parameter for anybody to monitor in any industry is temperature. There's lots of reasons for temperature. Do I have a boiler tank that's about to explode, or just is it 70 degrees in here and I want it to be 75? Temperature tends to change slowly. So if I have a pipe and I'm paying some rate for all the data I transfer, do I really need to tell my host system it's 75, it's 75.1, it's 74.9 over and over again? I probably only need to send that data a few times a day, and even better, if I never sent it, if I had enough processing out at the edge to just say, something really bad's happened, I should report that, rather than the mundane data, it'll cut down the load and the expense.
And there's a kind of a rush in the tech community for holding on to these big storages or inflows of data. You mentioned temperature and you mentioned Nest. I mean, Google jumped on that because they saw, okay, we're going to have a central spot inside the home. So my own company, we actually spent about 6 or 7 months just out with Microsoft at their Internet of Things Accelerator, where they, an American family, are looking at, how do we understand this data? How do we attract this data? And you're seeing similar plays from Amazon. Apple's clearly looking to get into it. This attraction of the data and what we do with it, where it goes, as I said earlier, it fuels everything in the growth of it. And that privacy aspect, that personal aspect, is almost accentuated in the consumer industry by this wearable because it's right there with you. I mean, Remo's waterproof. You can wear it in the shower, right? I mean, it's very, very personal. And what's really kind of a turning point is almost this deep decoupling of how intimate we feel about the data that we share. Yeah, that's there you go.
If you own a Nest, just be prepared. Every Google search, it'll prompt you to get a deal on a sweater or socks or something based on the temperature of your home. I mean, they're capturing this data, and then they'll target their ads based on
connected socks.
That's right, connected socks.
All right, I've got one last kind of prepared question for the panelists, and I want to do a couple of housekeeping things first and thank a couple other people. So I'll end with, after I do that, just asking each of you for a prediction. You can go 5 years out or 10 years out, your choice. What's one or two things that you expect to see in the connected world in the future? So think on that. They didn't get any of these because they didn't need any questions in advance. They know their topics so well, but I wanted to do a couple of things, and I think I'll just stand up for this because we did have a winner, and that was drawn in advance, Mike Ludwig, and this is for a personal Fitbit Flex device. So I don't know if Mike is here, so would you want to come up and get this? And thank you to Bosch for donating this. So we want more people to be connected.
We're going to track where you go after this event.
We're tracking you. We have so much built into that. But anyway, thanks for being here. So just curious, how many are wearing any type of wearable device today? So, okay. So that might be one prediction. How many are wearing anything wearable coming up? The other thing that I wanted to do is to make sure that I also thanked our sponsors and the speakers for being here today so that we could support a nonprofit, because this is in fact a series that is in the common good. So besides networking and sharing issues of the day, we support a nonprofit, and this time it's Genesis Works. Their mission is to enable economically disadvantaged high school students to enter and thrive in the economic mainstream. They provide knowledge and work experience, and they focus on the STEM technology. They focus on 8-week summer training, business internships, and college counseling and support. So over the past 7 years, they've placed more than 800 low-income students into corporate internships, with 95% enrolling in college after graduating from high school. And again, those are disadvantaged high school students, so that's a pretty great number. And so your participation, I wanted to thank you also here for being here today, also helps us to give them a generous donation, and certainly needy. So thanks again, Bosch, and all of you. So give yourself a hand for that, I would say.